Hello there, Gentleman here. This is gonna be a follow-up video on my previous one, showcasing all the spells. It's gonna be a bit more in-depth. I'm gonna go one by one on each spell, and I'm gonna give my thoughts on them, use case scenarios, and how strong I think they are and everything, and then I'm gonna rank them on this tier maker list. I also made this spreadsheet, which I'm gonna share at the end of the video. It's nothing much, it's nothing fancy. Some of the formulas are not even working and the inputs are manually given. Here you can see the mana cost, the cast time, the overall damage the spell is gonna make, if I have data with damage rings, if they benefit from them. All this is made with 129 int because I made this on my Shivra. If they have damage reduction to steel, I'm gonna show it. Hailstone, for example, is piercing, but the damage reduction here is similar to blunt because is 75% of the damage is piercing and 25% is magic or energy or whatever, frost damage. There's no reduction to frost damage, so right now you mitigate 60-something% of the 75%. Some other spells do multiple hits, and I gather them together because it's irrelevant for the math. Some other spells do damage over time, but I put the whole damage they are gonna deal over time. And some others, for example, Wind Barrier might look like it's a ton of damage, because it's 6 damage and 20 hits, so you are doing 120 damage. But because armor works a bit better on small hits if they have plates to lower incoming damage by flat amounts and all this stuff, so it's a bit worse than usual because they are small hits. So here it was somewhat relevant, so I did put the amount of hits and the small initial damage, you know. And yeah, some area of effects is so hard to know what's the maximum output. So I put this much per hit, and then in notes I claim how long they last, how many times the hit per second, and everything. Other than that, here you have the DPS, the cost per cast, and then the damage you deal per cost, per silver coins you spend on the spell, and the damage you deal per mana point spent. So if you need efficient spells that do a lot of damage for little mana, you can see clearly what was your best option. If you need a lot of damage for little cost to farm, you can also see your option. And if you need a lot of DPS and you don't care about price or mana cost, burst damage, you can also see which one is the one giving you the most damage. You can access this spreadsheet on the description. I'm gonna keep updating it bit by bit, maybe some improvements. Yeah, right now this works for me. I have 3 spells I use a lot for reference here from different magic schools. I might add all the spells in the game down the line. You can just go to filtering and sort by whatever you care to know about, you know. Okay, let's start with the tier list and commentary. Sludge. Sludge is... Right now, the only thing it does is super short range. The area is next to nothing. I don't know if you can hit more than one person with this. The cast time is bad. Skill range is super high for this useless thing. I don't know why the skill range is so high. And yeah, it does literally nothing. It gets oil on the target, but oil is only 10 extra damage on your next fire spell, so I don't know. On this cast time you can do 2 ignitions and do way more damage. This is not even 10 damage because you need to follow up with a fire spell damage. So it's one of the most useless spells in the game right now. I'm gonna rate by useless, rarely useful, very useful, and S tier. Okay. Hailstone is a good spell, but is outshined by Stone, which is better on every single way. So it's a kind of weird one because it should be rarely useful, but it's quite useful. But it gets Stone is just better. So the only time you will use Hailstone is if for whatever reason you don't have Granum nearby. Yeah, you just go to the vendor and grab salt. So yeah, if you live on a territory which doesn't have Granum and nobody has, but Granum is dirty cheap, is next to nothing. But if for whatever reason you don't have access to Granum, Hailstone it becomes the best go-to spell then for overall farming. And so yeah, for that reason, it's gonna be unuseful. Torrent doesn't make the cut for nearly anything. It has better knockback than Gale, but it's still useless. The range is super short, the damage is half as much of any counterpart. So Torrent, I don't like it at all right now. So it's gonna be useless. Stone is a really useful spell. The cast time is really short. The damage is one of the highest DPS spells in the game. It only gets outclassed by really expensive spells. The mana cost is super good. The damage per mana point spent and the damage per price is one of the highest. Stone is your go-to spell to farm anything in PvE. After you do the initial hit with whatever of the spell you want to engage, you swap to Stone. And unless you have Necromancy and Death Hand, you are gonna keep doing Stone until the enemy is done. NPC is done. Maybe if you have Death Hand and you have plenty of mana left, you can swap to Death Hand to also heal you while dealing the same DPS. Because Stone has the same DPS as Death Hand on NPCs. For PvP, is not that good. The hitbox is really bad on moving targets. Still, it's one of the spells you are gonna use the most in the game right now. So yeah, in my opinion, it's very useful. Stone is also super useful because the skill range is really low. So even if you don't have extra points for Elementalism, because you have other magic schools, as long as you have magic offense, is really heavily recommended to invest at least 10 to 15 points plus your bonus to get this spell. Is one of the best spells in the game. Dash Burst, this spell is really bad. It's a fourth of the damage of Stone DPS wise. Twice as expensive. It requires the maximum skill range, so you need 100 points into the skill, and the chance of inflicting any of the ailments is super low. It's never, you might use 5 in a row and you see nothing on the enemy target. It's completely useless. Mending Vapors. Okay, you are never gonna use this. It's gonna be super rare, super fringe situations. The healing is 18 healing points. It's area of effect, but the range is super small. Yeah, you can heal multiple things with it, but it's gonna be rare. You're gonna heal 2 per second. It's gonna take over 10 seconds, so between the cast time and everything, I think you need like at least 8 to 10 targets for it to be better than lesser healing and greater healing. So yeah, Mending Vapors is really bad. I'm gonna put it on useless, but there might be once in a blue moon where you can take advantage of this. Maybe, let's say everybody has the horses unfollow on the same person, or they are all standing still on one location, and they took damage somehow. Someone is doing area damage to the horses. So yeah, then you do Mending Vapors and Stealing Mist, and you try to chain them to try to all-heal the damage the horses are taking or whatever, but otherwise you need more than 10 players stacked on top of each other for it to work. So yeah, never. Gale. Gale is really underwhelming. It's the tiny hitbox and slow projectile speed. This should be like a cone in front of you, 50 to 60 degrees, and 500 units or something, and the knockback should be twice as long, because the knockback is super small. The cast time is bad for this little knockback. It should be, I mean, if you cut the cast time by half, if you made this 1 second cast time plus the animations, I'm still never using this. So if a spell gets 50% cast speed and nothing happens, it's still useless. It's a really useless spell. I tried every single way to make this spell work because I love the knockback mechanics on every game. But yeah, it does nothing. It's super easy to dodge. It barely knockbacks, and it's bad all around. You're never gonna use this. Ignition. Ignition might look like it's not worth a first sight, but it's a useful spell alongside with Shock. Why? You're gonna use this against Side Fighter and heavily armored people. It's super good too because it ignores Side, it ignores armor. So let's say a Side fighter is coming towards you. You are first gonna use Shock, and if the Side fighter is close enough to you that you're gonna shock yourself, if you use Shock, you swap to Ignition. It is so much better than T-Lash against high side targets. Shock and this one are very useful in that regard. So it's gonna be, it's not gonna be commonplace to use it, but it's a really important spell on multiple scenarios. So yeah, I'm gonna put them in useful. Ember has a low chance to add Ignite, but it still doesn't make the cut. Stone is better, DPS wise. So I guess that if you ever are auto Granum but have cold for some reason, let's say in the jungle, and yeah, if you live in the jungle and don't have any Granum nearby, and you have a refiner for the calcs or whatever, you can make cold. So it's rarely useful, but it can be used. Shock is super good. Shock, it goes ignores armor, ignores eye, and does 50% extra damage to the nearest target, on top of being a hit scan. So yeah, the range is not that long, but if you are in the middle of the fight, yeah, if you like to fight up close, it's amazing. It's still not very useful because of the range, but I say there is plenty of situations where Shock is worth using. With a bit more range, this spell will be very useful by far. This is a really good spell. Shadow is a different version of Cloud of Ash. With Cloud of Ash, nobody on the inside can see anything. Here you can see inside, and you can slightly see what's going on outside. The cast time is much longer, and you can barely move while casting, while on Cloud of Ashes you can sprint while casting. So yeah, I'd say this spell, I like Cloud of Ashes way more for the vast majority of situations. But yeah, this spell has some use on group fighting. It's gonna be rarely useful because Cloud of Ash exists, otherwise it will be useful. Yeah, so it's still useful when you want to deceive the enemy and not let him know how many people do you have. So it's only gonna be useful if you have multiple people in your party and you want to hide them. Maybe also in big group fights you're gonna cast shadow over your fat mages, so they are harder to target and harder to know how many there are. They can move out of the shadow from the line of sight of the enemy, and the enemy doesn't know if they are still on the shadow or not. Shivering Cold. Shivering Cold is a really bad spell. The area is too small. Not that it matters because you can do much with chill ailment right now. But yeah, the area is small. You refresh the chill once a second only. And yeah, the duration is short also, so I don't see any possible use for this spell right now in the game. Wellspring. Wellspring is adds Drenched. Drenched is 10 extra damage on your next shock spell, lightning spell, or whatever you want to call them. So yeah, it has a point. Is whenever you call a Wellspring, you are doing 90 area damage over half a minute if the whoever is on top is also taking lightning damage. This is gonna be rarely useful on PvE situations. Let's say you are on stationary targets, boss fights, and everything. If there's multiple people throwing lightning spells at the boss, it's still good damage. It's 90 damage in 4 seconds. It takes half a minute to get the full value of the spell. But yeah, it has some use in rarely. It's not completely useless. Crystal Formation. Crystal Formation has a really high cast time, a really low cast range, and the damage is very small amounts, so they get mitigated better by multiple clades and armors. It's so easy to leave the area before getting hit, and on top of that, the bleeding is only a low chance. You can cast this as a deterrence, but it's not a deterrence because you can cross over all these crystal formation and you might get hit only once, at most 2 times. They are gonna do barely any damage if you have armor, so you are not deterring any heavily armored target coming towards you. And the range is so low that you cannot cast this on the backline of on the enemies. So this is a completely useless spell. In the time you can do this, let's say you're a sci fighter and you want to cast this on the backline of the enemy team, you might hit 1 or 2 people. You're gonna do 3 to 4 damage to each of them, and there's gonna be a low chance to add bleeding. On that time, you can kill like 5 people with a sword. So yeah, Crystal Formation is completely trash. Star Shower. Star Shower is outclassed, in my opinion, by Starfall in so many ways, but it still has some space in the game. For example, if there is 2 big groups that are about to clash with each other and it's an open space, Star Shower is really good. Because Starfall is gonna get dodge, sidestep, they are just go around the Starfall and they are gonna keep going. But with the Star Shower, the area of effect is so wide, and yeah, the damage is random, but if 20 people are coming at you, they are gonna eat a lot of damage. Nobody is gonna get hit more than once or twice, but you're gonna do a lot of damage. Stealing Mist. Stealing Mist is super underwhelming, like Mending Vapors. But you can chain them both. It can only be used on situations where there's more than 5 to 10 targets, I think, that can benefit from it. So yeah, like I said on Mending Vapors, is most likely gonna be used if a bunch of horses following a person or standing still somewhere get damaged by something. If you want to heal that many horses or whatever, you're gonna use this, but otherwise it honestly doesn't work at all otherwise, because it doesn't distinguish friends from foes, and the healing is so negligent, so it's so little. You are so much better off just casting lesser healings or greater healing. So yeah, in my opinion, this spell is useless. Air Pocket. Air Pocket is gonna be rarely useful, but it's gonna be super useful on those times you need it. It's only gonna be focused on PvE, but if you are looting shipwrecks, for example, underwater, if you want to go to an underwater cave or whatever, I'm gonna put Air Pocket here because it's not useless by any means. It has some specific uses, and this is the type of spells that should be on the game on Elementalism, in my opinion, because they have a purpose and they meet the expectations, and when you use them you feel super rewarding. That moment when you can say, oh, I have a pocket, I can do this, which I could not do otherwise, those moments are super rewarding as a mage. Conflagration. Conflagration is weird because it's half the damage of spells like Firewall or Static Charge, but the area of effect is super big. There is plenty of choke points in the game on which this spell will be super useful. It's a pity that you don't go to them often, so that's why I'm gonna put Conflagration on rarely useful, because unless you live on places where this spell really shines, you'd rather use the other spells. But yeah, for example, if your stronghold is getting siege and the door is open and they are gaining access to your stronghold and you want to do a beautiful choke point, for example, one of the biggest choke points for this spell is the staircase on strongholds, because you can hit multiple levels on top of the whole stair, you know? So it definitely has some uses, yeah. Sweltering Heat. This spell is useless. It does warm once every 5 seconds. The range is meaningless. The cast time is huge. I don't ever see a point to use this shit. Useless. Illumination, the same as Air Pocket. It's gonna spell you rarely use, but when you use it feels super rewarding. So Illumination is gonna go on rarely useful. Starfall. Starfall has long cast time, low damage. The oil doesn't help because it's only 1 tick. And the chance to blind is high, but it's not always. So in my opinion, this spell is useless. It's super hard to land. The travel time is super slow. I don't think there is any scenario I will be casting this over anything else. So it's gonna be useless. Comet. Comet is it's not the best DPS. It's not the best cast time. The travel time is very slow, so it's easy to dodge. But it has a sweet spot of 500 units. So let's say you see a player coming at you, you time it so after you finish the spell he's at 500, 600 units away from you. He's coming towards you, he's gonna eat the full damage. If you cast it properly, and it's gonna be hard to dodge and that close to you. So there is a small window where you can use this on PvP, and on PvE is useful because the cost per damage point is through the roof. This spell is super cheap. It's dirty cheap. And if you don't care about mana efficiency, this is a spell you will use very often to farm. So yeah, there is some use cases in PvP, and there is also a lot of use in PvE, so Comet is a useful spell. With a bit more damage or a bit less cast time or a bit very small slightly buffs can make this go from useful to very useful, in my opinion. Scouring Stream. Scouring Stream is like a baby version of Outsurge with way less area, way less travel speed, but a bit more distance. If you are a fat mage with low mobility, it's very rare to be able to use Outsurge, so this can come handy. Other than a few choke points in the game, it's also good to cast it at the start of the fight towards the backline, because it will drain a spell reflect on the backline, then go backwards to the front line, drain a spell reflect there, and then go back to the backline. I don't know how many times you can change it, but I have seen a few back and forth. If you are on the right position on which you can cast into the backline, and then the spell will go back and forth between spell reflex, and you will burn a lot of spell reflex and deal a lot of damage. The skill range is very small, so you only need to invest a small amount of points in Elementalism to get this skill. It's gonna be rarely useful. In my opinion, it needs a bit buff increase on cast, either cast time, projectile speed, area of effect, damage. Otherwise, this spell is very underwhelming, but there is a bunch of places where you can actually use it and feel like it's worth your time. Boulder. Boulder is one of those spells that look super cool, but it's not that useful. The hitbox is super weird whenever you're casting from top of buildings. So it's super hard to aim properly, because whatever you have in front covering your character is gonna be getting in the way of the spell. The travel time is super high, but the area once it lands is quite decent, and it goes through walls and everything. Sometimes you can hit people inside buildings and everything, and it's 2 hits. This spell is only gonna be used rarely if you are defending and you are getting siege and you are getting overwhelmed with people, you don't know what to target. You can throw a few of these. I mean, I would rather be casting Starfall or Star Shower, but this is lower mana cost, this is lower skill range, this is lower regen cost. So yeah, sometimes you rather cast this and see the ball rolling, and it's not that bad. Sand Spout is trash. The damage is low, the projectile speed is bad, the low chance to add is next to nothing. You can cast 5 of these and you will do no debuffs, ailments, or anything. I think this spell is useless. I don't ever see myself casting this over anything else. Fuming Bubble. Fuming Bubble is a bit weird. It might look like it's not good enough, but for close range, it's not that bad. There are better options, but this spell is not that bad. Also, you have low regen costs coming from the vendor items, so it's very easy to access to the regens. And yeah, it's a spell where you can use against fat mages, for example, with high psi that you leave a poison, which is not that bad. If you are working against heavy armor frontline, Tombsteel or Ammu, it can be very useful because between the damage that ignores everything and the poison, is decent enough damage. And yeah, to a mage, the poison on top will tick and interrupt. So yeah, it's very close quarters, but it can still be rarely useful. Whirlwind. Whirlwind is amazing. I love it. It's what Gale should be, but on steroids. Because it not only hit... the knockback is not only twice as far away, but you can chain with the same spell. If you hit it properly, the player that is getting hit will keep getting hit over and over by the same hit, traveling forward. Whirlwind is an amazing spell. It can be used on so many choke points in the game and on so many situations. If you have the height advantage and you throw to someone near a cliff, you are removing them from the fight, if not killing them outright. Fireball. Fireball is an amazing spell with amazing area of effect. A spell with high damage, unmitigated damage, relatively cheap, huge range, but effective range is much less. If the range is 4,000 units, effective range is around 700 units. If there is more than one target and they are coming towards your team and you throw a bunch of fireballs, as long as they don't... The problem is if they have a spell reflect, but as long as you know for a fact that they don't have a spell reflect up, this spell will demolish them. Like, the area is so big, you can hit multiple people by the same hit all the time. And 2 or 3 or 4 hits of this spell and everybody's gone that is getting hit. In my opinion, Fireball is very useful. It's not there at S tier because the travel speed is relatively slow, and it gets heavily countered by spell reflect. There is plenty of places where this spell does really shine, and you feel amazing casting it. Lava Ball. Lava Ball is a bit weird, in my opinion. Lava Ball is like a worse version of Fireball, but lives a lot. The travel time is even worse. The aiming is much worse. The distance you can cast this from is much worse. But it has some rare case scenario. If you can get a distance to siege equipment, those manganons or whatever, catapults or whatever they are called, and if you can land these on stationary targets using siege weapons, it's gonna be way more damage than any other spell. So yeah, it's really good against stationary targets, but it's not as good as Firewall or whatever against them. And on PvE, you'd rather use those other high damage to stationary targets before this. So this is rarely used on PvP situations where you have stationary targets at range of this spell, which is hard to achieve, but it can be done. And once you do, it's gonna be a ton of damage to people controlling those siege weapons. So it has a place in the game, in my opinion. Lightning Ball. Lightning Ball has a lot of area, is super cheap, is not mitigated by anything. I'd rather cast Fireball on most situations, but Lightning Ball is still a strong contender. I love Fireball so much that whenever I feel like using lightning bolt could be used, I rather use Fireball. But I don't know, maybe I should start testing a bit of both. The difference between these is whether or not you can take advantage of some dot that has synergy with any of them, you know. So, but yeah, I don't know why I love Fireball so much. I rather use Fireball if possible. So I don't use lightning bolt much, but yeah, they are both really strong spells. Yeah. Consuming Void. Consuming Void is a bit weird. In my opinion, it needs some love. Lower cast time, for example. The cast time is way too long. I don't care. I don't mind it being minimum range in the game, but the cast time, lower the cast time, and this spell will be way more useful. Right now, it's rarely useful. This spell has a high skill ceiling. If there is, for example, a situation where you have you and a footy, and you meet two footies, and this spell really shines to fight against those situations which are close to even. If you are outnumbered, this spell is trash. It's not gonna help you anything. You are better off just running away from the fight and disengaging. But if the fight is really close, this spell can cover you a lot of ground, because I doubt if you are a good mage, I doubt any footy can hit you being around this. The slow is super good. It's a really nice slow, and they rarely see the spell, so you have the upper hand, because if you know the spell well enough, you can actually fight back. You can be destroying them with ignitions, shocks, death hands. You can use so many spells while being kiting the enemies, you know. They are gonna have, if you are around this and one or two footies are chasing you with this in the way, you are gonna have such a better time protecting yourself. In my opinion, the problem is the duration and the cast time. If we ever see a buff in those two ways, either lower cast time or more duration, this spell will be amazing. But for now, it's rarely useful. It requires a high skill ceiling, which no mage these days is going for. Ice Barrier. Ice Barrier is a useful spell. It was some useful on some situations that is forbidden to use. You cannot cast this in town, you will get banned. There is so many ways to exploit this spell to work around stuff that is illegal in towns these days. That's how you know how useful this spell is. So yeah, it's not completely broken, because it would be completely broken if you could use this in towns against NPCs and guards and everything. But right now, if you use like that, you are gonna get banned, so it's only useful. It's really good to split fights, to gain a bit of time before you or whoever is inside go back into the fight, you know. It gives you a bit of breathing for people to use bandages, get healing, and then go back, you know, to the fight. Ice Barrier has plenty of uses, yeah. It's a useful spell. Water Ward, useless spell. There's nothing here. It has some mechanics, but they got removed, and they did nothing with the spell. They just nerfing to become nothing. This spell might as well not be in the game right now. Stonewall. Stonewall could be so good yet it's trash. Stonewall cast time is ridiculously high, and then once you finish the cast, there's a delay. So it's like you need 5 to 6 seconds to see the fucking wall. On top of that, if you hit somebody with the wall, if the spell is not timed properly, it will knock up someone for 10 damage, and the wall will not even show, or show on top of the enemies, and they can still cross. It's super buggy. There are so many bugs around this. The duration is fucking trash. It lasts 1 or 2 seconds. It's literally nothing. And the placement is super annoying. The cast time is super high, and the spell cost is high. So it's not that cheap to cast. You are better off doing literally anything else. This spell is trash right now. Sun Barrier. Sun Barrier is, in my opinion, is trash right now. There's not a single case where I will use this over anything else, because they don't stack. You hit the player only once, rarely twice, and you could say, oh, at least I can cast this. The cast range is nothing, so you cannot cast this on the back line, and you cannot protect yourself or your team, because, well, you can protect yourself, which barely does anything, because you're gonna do 15 damage and then a small bleed on the target once they cross the line. But if you do this and you're a big group, or you're most likely gonna hit your team, because there is a small on the center of the spell. It shows a barrier protecting you in an area, you know. Whoever crossed the line gets hit once, but it also does a fucking area on the center of the spell, so you can hit your team. This will be much better if the center will have no extra damage, and only the side barrier. The barrier could be a bit the area a bit more distance to cover more people. I see this working as the deterrence for the divers to hit the backline, but this is rarely ever gonna work. And the damage is reduced by armor, so the backline is gonna destroy you. This spell should do way more damage or ignore armor, and not have the center. Some barrier right now is, in my opinion, is trash. Geyser Wall. Geyser Wall is like a weaker, more expensive version of Firewall. It does less damage and is more expensive, but you have a small knockup. I don't see myself using this over either Firewall or Static Charge, but I guess there's some places in the game where the knockback on top of the damage can be useful to try to throw people off guard or move them out of the choke point. In small bridges, in Mino Dungeon, in Necro Dungeon, on the Invisible Bridge and everything, you can throw people away with this and remove them from the fight, other than the small amount of damage they are gonna eat. Wind Barrier is a beautiful spell that can wreak so much havoc. There's so many places where you can use this, inside dungeons, in sieging, on each side of the conflict, you know. If you get someone stuck to some terrain, they are between you and a cliff, or either on the top or the bottom of the cliff, because on the valleys it can also wreak havoc. They get stuck in the wall, they lose the control of their character, and they are taking damage in the meantime. This spell is amazing. It's only very useful instead of S tier, because the range is super short and is a bit costly, but otherwise this will be S tier. It's just that I don't see people using it often, but it can do so much. If you always have in mind, oh, I could use this here, and you act upon it, you are gonna feel super rewarded most of the time whenever you use this. It's also useful for preventing the divers to hit your backline. It's also a nice disengage tool if you are losing the fight and you're thinking about retreating. You can tell your team, oh, gather stamina, we are gonna cast Wind Barrier and then leave. Firewall. Firewall is, alongside the Static Charge, the biggest damage in the game to stationary targets, and they stack with each other. This spell is heavily unbalanced right now. It's so wide to balance around it also, because anyone willingly crossing across this is gonna get hit once, at most twice. But if you manage to push them back into the fire and they are standing still more than 1 second, they are gonna get hit 2 or 3 times on top of the initial one when they were crossing. So there is plenty of ways to combo this into a deadly machine. In PvP and on PvE is just one of the best things you can throw your time at, the DPS wise. Mirage is useless as fuck, it's expensive, it does literally nothing. I don't even know what they were going for with this one. In my opinion, useless. Static Charge is the same as Firewall, biggest stationary DPS in the game. They go super well with each other. It gets advantage of all these spells that drench the target a lot to do some extra damage. And yeah, anything standing on top of any of these 2 spells would get disintegrated. Tar Pit. Oh boy. Tar Pit is crazy. Tar Pit has high mana cost, high cast time, it requires foggy weather, yet still is a useful spell. It will be so much more if any of those 3 points changes, you know. The damage is already quite decent, because you're gonna hit the targets on the place at least twice, and it's gonna be around more than 100 damage per target just by itself. And if you have ring, it's gonna be a bit more. Obviously, the damage is gonna be blunt. Most of the damage is gonna be blunt, so it can be lowered with equipment, but not by much. Is one of the lowest reductions. But the best thing Tar Pit does is that it blinds targets, which is amazing, and also something that is nothing to scoff at is that they will permanently be coated in oil. This spell coat in oils like 10 times per second. Any fire spells that lands on the target is gonna do 10 extra damage on that location, yes or yes. If you time this alongside a decent fire spell, or multiple fire spells as a combo with multiple people, one of them throwing Tar Pit and the rest throwing fire spells at the location, the combo damage is through the roof. There is nothing that can give more combo damage in the game than Tar Pit. Yet, since the mana cost, the cast time, and the requirements for the weather requirements are there, it cannot be more than useful spell, because it's gonna be you really want to use this spell, but the game is gonna constrain you into not using it for multiple reasons. So yeah, I still believe it's a really nice spell with a lot of potential. Hailstone is super disappointing because you see the spell on paper and you see, what the fuck, this is broken as fuck, you know? But the area of the spell is misleading because the targets need to be directly hit by the animations. The shards coming from the sky, you need to get directly hit. And there's only 3 shards on the whole area per second, which it's a lot. It's a lot of damage. 3 shards per second and on a 25-second cast duration spell is amazing damage on area. But the area is super small for each shard. So you need to be on top of the shard to get hit by the shard. You can leave this area in a second. So at most you are gonna get hit 2 times. At most, if you're actively in that in the storm, whenever it gets cast, you can leave the storm within a second and you get hit at most twice. So it's a bit of area denial, but in my opinion, Starfall is a better area denial than this. It does more damage, it's way more reliable, 10,000 units more range than Starfall, but 3,000 units on Starfall is already super good. It's already plenty of range. And you require, on top of that, snow, fucking snow. The snow is not naturally anywhere but on Ispelia, on the northern side of the map, and on a very small fraction of it by those metrics, and it's super hard to make. This spell can easily be countered. If you see snow, you're seeing someone and you see snow, you're just gonna use one of your Elementalists to weather change to something else. So this spell cannot be cast to begin with, you know? So it's heavily constrained on so many levels, and on top of that, the cost is mind-blowing to me. The cost is more than 20 gold per cast at this moment. If you go by market value of the salt, it's mind-blowing to me how expensive this spell is. For that sole reason, this spell is useless, because there is not a single time in the world I would use this over Starfall on top of the gold cost being 20 times more expensive. It's mind-blowing to me that this spell got released in this way, because the salt that is used for this spell, it does only drop on really small quantities under such lake and on desert biomes. For example, on Spider Valley, I believe there's a few of these crystals, and the quantity you get on the world is so small. So unless there is a way to make this crystal with, it will make sense to me in my opinion, because it's just fucking salt, you know. Maybe it's combining salt with something else on one of the machines, and you get this material, because otherwise this spell cost doesn't make any sense to me. Because with the salt crystals you can make also potions and some other stuff, so it's useful for different things than this spell. So you're never gonna get this spell any use, because you rather use those materials on making potions. The potions you can make with that material are gonna be way better than this shitty spell that is outclassed by gets outclassed by Starfall on every single way. The cost is 10 salt crystals and a pouch. You put this at 1 salt crystal and I'm still not casting this over Starfall. You can lower the cost 10 times and I'd rather cast Starfall than this. That's how bad this spell is, in my opinion. Hailstone. Water Spiral. The damage is not that bad, but the cost is one of these 10 silver pouch. And on top of that, the area is super wonky. It barely ever works. in order to target with this spell, it's gonna be a nightmare for you. It doesn't shotgun. The travel speed is trash. Whenever it collides, it doesn't do area damage. It only hits on the death center of the collision. There's no sort of any sort of area on the damage. It gets mitigated by armor. I don't know. This spell is trash in my opinion on every single way. It's super hard to target. The collision is trash, and the spell cost is very high for what it does. So I will never use this over anything else. So it's going to use less. Gravity Snare. Gravity Snare, in my opinion, has a lot of potential because the range is super huge, and it can break formations, and it's a spell you can cast before two teams clash with each other to merge the back line with the front line and the other way around. It's gonna be unrarely useful just because the mana cost is through the roof. Is 125 mana cost. Otherwise, if you lower the mana cost a bit or a bunch because it's crazy expensive, this spell will be strike unuseful. Starfall. Starfall is amazing. I love it. It's the better version of many other spells. It rarely gets used because not many people have level Elementalism to that degree, or are daily carrying those regions. But I think Starfall is way better than people think. Is one of the best flagship this Magic School has. Scalding Fumes. Scalding Fumes is surprisingly one of the best spells in the game, in my opinion. Is the biggest single target damage burst in the game, and the hitbox is good enough. You can shotgun with it, you can use it effectively as a short range. It drops 11 darts. They ignore every single mitigation. And if you shotgun, the target is gonna eat the 11 darts. 180 hit points of damage. And in PvE, the mobs are gonna eat 250 or whatever, I don't know. Crazy amounts. Whenever I'm using Scalding Fumes and I land every single dart, I feel like a god. And even if you use this at mid-range and the target doesn't eat all the darts, as long as they eat 3 or 4 darts, you are already well over any of the rest of the spells in terms of usefulness. I love it. It's a bit costly. It's 2 gold per cast, more or less, but it doesn't matter. The cost doesn't offset the value you get from the spell. I wish I could use this spell on PvE also. It's just that the cost is not justified. I'd rather be... If I farm with this, I make no money because I am spending all the money in the cast, you know? But yeah, for PvP it's amazing. Roaring Wind. Roaring Wind is like Wind Barrier on steroids. I love it. It's another flagship spell for Elementalism. Is what is everybody's gonna remember in a big siege fight. Is all the tornadoes going around and wreaking havoc in lanes, positioning and everything for everyone. It's super disruptive. It also, the animation of the tornado is gonna blind people off. Right now it doesn't work inside buildings, which it should not do much inside buildings either way, but it neither works on the rooftops. I believe this should do plenty havoc on the rooftops of strongholds. Sadly it doesn't work yet there, but I hope they find a way for it to not work inside buildings but work on the rooftops, because yeah, it will make it even more justified. Firestorm is a bit of a miss in my opinion. The regen cost, the mana cost, the cast time, and the weather requirement are a bit too much. I never feel like I can cast this over anything else, even if I were to have the regents. Maybe if you live next to Tefra Crater and you have Pyropite everywhere and you don't know what to do with it. But unless you are getting siege next to Tefra Crater or close on a close location where you can reliably get Pyropite, I don't see any use for this spell. Either way, it's gonna be unreadably useful because it's not that bad per se. It's just that the access to the regen and the requirements for weather requirements alongside with the cast time and mana cost, everything adds up, and there's not many situations where you can use this. Lava Flow. Lava Flow has similar problems to Firestorm, but at the very least, it doesn't require any weather. Very useful sometimes, but it's gonna be limited to unuseful in my opinion. It's a bit worse for one-shotting and shotgunning people than Scalding Fumes. And there's long range is literally nothing. There's no way in hell anyone gets hit by this unless they are unaware of the hits coming. Fire Dot is not good enough. You can only shotgun with it, which, don't get me wrong, shotgunning with a spell is super useful. It would be higher if were not for Scalding Fumes being in the game. Because Scalding Fumes, in my opinion, is a much better version of Lava Flow. So, Lightning Ball. The last one. Lightning Ball is a bit weird because if you're controlling this, you cannot do much else. But this spell has huge area potential and huge damage. Is more than justified. The damage you get, the area damage you can get with this is amazing on single targets. If you are wasting your time to control the spell for 10 seconds, it almost feels rewarding even when fighting single targets. And when you have multiple targets for this to go through, the damage output you can get with this spell is through the roof. It does ignore every single mitigation in the game currently, so it's really good for high hitbox target, be it PvE or PvP. For example, let's say there is a bunch of Campadons on the siege, they are wearing Omnium armor or whatever, everybody's having a really hard time to take them down. A few mages change the weather and throw a few lightning bolts to them, those Campadons are gonna get obliterated. You can shoot this through the windows or the rooftop. This is the type of spells I wish all these useless spell brackets would have, is that they are super good but they require some sort of weather. But sadly, all this bunch here, it doesn't meet any of those requirements. So for me, Lightning Ball is at the very least very useful. It will be S tier, were it not having weather requirements. But since it does have weather requirements, it has to remain on very useful. So overall, this is my tier list. S tier, Firewall, Static Charge, Scalding Fumes, and Roaring Wind. Very useful, Stone, Whirlwind, Fireball, Wind Barrier, Starfall, and Lightning Ball. Useful, Hailstone, Ignition, Shock, Comet, Lightning Ball, Ice Barrier, Tar Pit, Lava Flow. Rarely useful, Ember, Shadow, Wellspring, Star Shower, Air Pocket, Conflagration, Illumination, Scouring Stream, Boulder, Fuming Bubble, Lava Ball, Consuming Void, Geyser Wall, Gravity Snare, Firestorm, and sadly the useless spells Sludge, Torrent, Dust Burst, Mending Vapors, Gale, Shivering Cold, Crystal Formation, Stealing Mist, Sweltering Heat, Tarval, Spout, Water Wall, Stone Wall, Sun Barrier, and Mirage, Hailstone, and Water Spiral. This is an ongoing thing. Maybe in next patch there's gonna be a bunch of changes that make me completely consider this. Even if you don't do any change to any of the spells, just by implementing new zones, new layouts, new terrain, it can completely change my opinion on many of these spells, you know? Because somehow maybe I see, oh, actually, or let's say they open a dungeon and the boss is always doing area damage to everybody in the vicinity. Then Mending Vapors somehow, if you need 20 kills to kill the boss, it's a solid strategy to everybody be on top of the Mending Vapors constantly to offset some of the area damage you are gonna eat either way. So yeah, it's new PvE content getting released, new PvP content getting released, new environments, new layouts, new dungeons, everything can change.